It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 18th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 24 years of excellence. Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Week number 4, just hours from kicking off. Andy Hall, joined as always by Brian Eikenberry, nearly a quarter of the way through the season already. Hard to believe.
Yeah, it's we were so eager for it to be here. We had Christmas, we opened our presents, and now it's depressing. 25% is gone.
It's true. And for some of you, this 25% has been fantastic.
Others, it has been terrible.
Now, this is important. A very important piece of your championship season, particularly those of you that have started 1-2 or even 0-3. Whatever you do, take this from Brian and I both. Do not give up.
No, absolutely not. You're 0-3. You're not 0-10. You're 0-3 or 1-2. Think about it. You're only 2 or 3 games back, and you still got 75% of the season.
I know the feeling, though.
Oh, it sucks. I've been there.
That stone in your gut.
I've been in the cellar before. You start racking up the money you're going to owe at the end of the year, and you're like, this isn't going to be cool.
The voices start to get louder because people are getting on your case about how horrible your team has been.
Vultures are starting to pick off your roster, and, well, hey, I'll give you a 2-for-1 and a 3-for-1. Yeah, it's there. It happens.
Brian and I will help get you out of that. Don't worry about it.
Got you covered.
We invite you to be a part of our online community on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy, and online at espndesmoines.com. We're all about interacting with you. Our guarantee, as always, we will never ignore you. You invest in us, we give it right back. Brian, we do that in many ways.
Absolutely we do. We give back via Twitter, 515 Fantasy, or at IKEFFB. We give back on our Facebook page, 515 Fantasy Football page, and even on the 1350 ESPN Des Moines webpage.
Which is basically what I just said.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. A ton of things to cover over our 2-hour show, including grades on all the fantasy-relevant players, break down each of this week's matchups, and remember, bye weeks begin now with the Eagles and the Packers off in Week 4. Those of you that are in need of a dart throw, we got another round of Bargain Bin upcoming, pop quiz answering 3 of fantasy's toughest questions, and the always unpredictable but usually entertaining flea flicker will wrap things up. But we begin, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note. Vikings running back Adrian Peterson has been telling people he believes he can be ready to play when eligible to be activated from the IR after 8 weeks, according to sources. Brian, give me the percent chance Adrian Peterson returns after Week 8.
I will go with 51%.
You really think it's a majority?
And I'm saying that only because the guy kept himself healthy. He always kept his nose clean when it came to fitness and nutrition. And if there's anybody who has a chance at coming back early, and they do all these plasma injections now and all of this stuff to increase healing, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be this guy. Now, is he going to be effective? I don't know.
It's interesting that you say 51%. I might take the 49 in that equation.
Taking the 49, huh?
I might have to do that. Steelers plan on using both Le'Veon Bell and D'Angelo Williams both in the same backfield versus Kansas City this week, a topic we will hit on a little later on. Dolphins running back Arian Foster will miss more time. Kenyon Drake, Jay Ajayi, Damian Williams. Do any of those 3 sound attractive to you? Are you targeting any Dolphins runner at this point?
Not when the head coach comes out and says this will be a full-blown rotation.
Yeah, I don't like it either. Tight end Jordan Cameron also ruled out for tonight's game. Bears running back Jeremy Langford has a sprained ankle. He's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. That opens the door for Jordan Howard, who was a top waiver pickup this week. Oh, by the way, Joik Bell has been signed by the Chicago Bears. Might even have a role as soon as this week.
When I seen that, my ears kind of perked up a little bit because if I had the roster room, I would have added Joik Bell instantly.
Especially now with Langford out. I mean, it's a smart move for the Bears.
Yeah, he was a good player. It was just a crowded backfield in Detroit, and there were more versatile options as he is very one-dimensional running back.
No doubt about that.
That one dimension is very good.
Giants running back Shane Vereen tore his triceps on Sunday. This combination of Orleans Darkwa, Bobby Rainey, Paul Perkins, I'm just not interested outside of maybe dynasty formats where I have a Paul Perkins, but I'm staying far away from that Giants backfield.
See, you need to be a little more optimistic, sir.
No way.
I nailed Vereen on the bargain bin last week.
You got what you needed out of him.
I got what I needed, pal. On to the next.
Oh, man. I just don't see it. I mean, it starts with a really difficult matchup this week against the Vikings on Monday night. And if you look ahead at the Giants' schedule, not exactly favorable for running backs in general. We don't know when Jennings is going to come back either, so that's going to further cloud that situation there.
More to come.
Don't be surprised if Lions running back Dwayne Washington gets more work this week versus the Bears. A report coming out of Detroit. It all depends on game script, doesn't it? I mean, when they fall behind early like they did against Green Bay last week, it's going to be the Theo Riddick game and the passing game as far as the Lions offense goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll cover this in depth in my matchup, but a little hint, I'm not buying it.
The Dolphins plan to stick with their 4-back rotation for tonight's game versus the Bengals, so there's the answer to that question. Ravens running back Kenneth Dixon returned to practice this week. He's not expected back in game action until week 5, however, so if you're targeting Kenneth Dixon and if he's on your waiver wire, now's probably a good time to grab him before everybody's even thinking about him. He was the one he looked best out of all the backs in the preseason, I'd say, before he got hurt. And through 3 games, nobody's really stepped up and taken that role in Baltimore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when you hear this show, you should not be in the waiver waiting list. So you can go out and just have a free ad.
That's correct, as our show airs every Thursday from 11 to 1 on 1350 ESPN Radio in Des Moines. Russell Wilson exited Sunday's game against the Niners with a knee injury, but head coach Pete Carroll expects him to play this weekend. Is this guy Superman?
They have no other choice. He has to
be.
be.
So Trayvon Boykin is the backup quarterback. Got a little bit of time last weekend.
Yeah, we were watching the game, and a friend of mine said, trivia question, who's the backup quarterback? And nobody. Well, you can't guess that.
Tavares Jackson? That was last year, I think. Speaking of the Seahawks, C.J. Spiller is a Seattle Seahawk.
Ears perked up a little bit there, too.
I think it's smart, though, because if you think about it, look at Thomas Rawls. My opinion, he's cooked, Thomas Rawls. Yeah. I think there's some major issues going on
Dunzo.
There. Yep. So if you own Rawls, he's borderline droppable at this point, in my opinion. Christine Michael, it's going to be his show for the time being, and then they're got a couple of those rookies there, one of which has a broken hand. So it's probably smart that they picked up C.J. Spiller, if nothing else, to be a pass-catching option, because that's what C.J. Prosise is. He's the one with the broken hand, by the way.
Yep, so. The pass-catching thing was my point, yeah.
Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett, both practicing this week for the Patriots. Who it will be under center for the Patriots this weekend is anybody's guess. I read somewhere Rex Ryan actually trolled the Patriots during a press conference trying to find out who's starting at quarterback for the Patriots.
Not surprising.
That's hilarious. I don't think Bill Belichick cracked a smile, though, unfortunately. Cowboys wide receiver Des Bryant, a hairline fracture in his knee. He's day-to-day, week-to-week. Doesn't sound good to me. The team insists that he is a possibility to play this weekend, but I don't think I'm believing that.
I don't believe it, but I'm not ruling it out either.
Cardinals wide receiver Michael Floyd, he's been cleared for football activity following a concussion in last weekend's game. Steelers wide receiver Eli Rogers sustained an injury to his left foot in Sunday's loss. The Jets have claimed former Bucs tight end Austin Seferian-Jenkins. This is something else I want to spend some time on as we move forward in the show to see if you think he might have any kind of a role there, or maybe they're happy with what they've got which is really no tight end.
Zero
but
catches.
Quincy Enunwa is basically serving as that guy that runs those routes, and he's been targeted more than Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker almost combined. So a lot of work there, and we'll see if Austin Seferian-Jenkins gets his shot in New York. Speaking of the Jets, wide receiver Eric Decker absent from practice yesterday. Kind of a weird thing. He's dealing with a shoulder ailment, so hopefully he'll be okay for this weekend. Redskins wide receiver Deshawn Jackson sat out of practice yesterday with an ankle injury. Bills wide receiver Sammy Watkins also did not practice, and neither did Colts wide receiver T.Y. Hilton. Chargers tight end Antonio Gates missed week 3 with a hamstring injury, likely to also miss week 4. I would grab Hunter Henry now if I were you. I don't know if I'd play him right away, though. Rookie tight ends, man.
No, right now we're in a good spot to stash.
Indeed. That's a good call. Going to get right into the matchups here shortly. You're listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. on 1350 a.m. ESPN Radio in Des Moines. You can also get us on iTunes, Stitcher, and lots of other fun places. Online as well at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. Over 40 years of fantasy domination between the two of us. I'm in my 24th season this year, Brian. All kinds of championships left and right. So if nothing else, we can tell you that we've been there, we've done that, we've had those issues. We know how to fix your team.
Yes, we do.
If you are looking for specific help, we invite you to reach out to us on our Facebook page or on Twitter at 515Fantasy. Brian and I are always available.
Always available, always chiming in, and even sometimes you get differing opinions, and we leave it for you to decide.
Yeah, those are always fun. We try to come to a consensus for you, do you that favor, but sometimes Brian and I do disagree. And it is fun when we disagree because then I can look Ryan right in the eye and say, you're wrong.
No, that's not how it goes. But
let's get into the matchups, Brian. We'll begin with Thursday Night Football. Tonight's matchup featuring the Dolphins and the Bengals.
All right, so Miami at Cincinnati. Quarterback Ryan Tannehill, I'm going to give him a B. Tannehill has a decent matchup, but it's Tannehill and the Dolphins aren't great, and they aren't in great shape. So I would expect about a 250, maybe 2 touchdowns out of Tannehill. And we talked about it in the headlines, Ajayi, Drake. Look, they're all B-minuses. You can't really plan on either one of them playing. The head coach stated there will be a 3 running back rotation. So I'm not getting involved in this poker hand. Just step back, and honestly, the offense is only averaging 85 yards per game rushing. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, B. Surprisingly, the Dolphins are 10th best passing offense, which is really surprising when you look at that, at who's there and who's catching the ball. He is listed as questionable, but I'm okay with him at this point. So Landry, B. Stills is going to get a C. He has 16.4 yards per catch, which is awesome. But then you realize he's only caught 8 balls, so that kind of brings you back down into reality. So stats aren't everything. You have to look beyond the shiny token on top there. And you did hear Jordan Cameron is out. So their other tight end, Sims, he's questionable. So at this point, just stay away from any tight end in Miami. Everyone's getting injured anymore.
They really are. You didn't mention Devontae Parker there. He's a guy that I'm targeting now that he's back in the lineup. The dude seems to be a bit of a head case, but he's a first-round talent.
Yeah, I agree with that. However, you've got to prove yourself at this point. And I can't stick an unknown in my roster right now. You just can't do that.
But you gave a bunch of nobody running backs B- grades. Those are starting grades.
Do you want me to give Parker a grade just right off the top of my head?
Or you downgrade all those horrible running backs down to C- grades, or you're not starting them.
Yeah, well, I'm basing them off of their potential production. And it's going to work out. Watch, Dolphins or the Bengals are going to give up some rushing yards.
I like to ruffle Brian's feathers.
Yeah.
A bit. Go ahead.
Hey, mind if I finish this up here quick?
Do it.
Quarterback Andy Dalton, A-, 7th best passing offense, primed up against an average Miami pass defense. Dalton is needing those touchdowns, but he has 900 plus yards and 2 touchdowns in 3 games. So the touchdowns are the issue for me in wanting to start Dalton. I think this is the week where he's actually going to double his touchdown production. So look for 303 out of Dalton this week. Gio and Jeremy Hill both are getting B+. How am I giving them both B+? Because the Dolphins are the 31st worst rushing defense, it aligns great with the Bengals' dual threat here. While the Bengals might not have a ton of rushing yards, so this is the matchup that they need to do at home. So if you have either Gio or Jeremy Hill, start them both. Wide receiver A.J. Green's going to get an A. He has 22 receptions, so that's good. Look for an additional touchdown this week. Tyler Boyd, B, and LaFell, B. Boyd, I think he's going to get his first touchdown this week. We talked about how bad Miami's defense is. Brandon LaFell, funny thing about him, he has that big 18 yards per catch as well. And tight end C.J. Uzoma, he only has 7 catches through 3 games, so not an interest to me.
My first matchup is the London matchup, Indy versus Jacksonville. On the Colts side, Andrew Luck is an easy A grade. In 6 prior matchups against the Jags, he's averaged over 25.5 fantasy points per game, with the high water mark in Jacksonville in 2014 when he threw for 370 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Jags have surrendered 6 passing touchdowns through 3 games, and Luck should also be able to chip in some fantasy production with his feet in this one as well. Frank Gore, I give a C grade too. Hasn't had good luck recently against the Jags, rushing for less than 4 yards per carry in both of his 2015 matchups against them with no scores. Though he did find the end zone last week, I'm not convinced this is a great spot for him from a fantasy perspective. T.Y. Hilton, a B+. In his past 5 matchups against Jacksonville, every other game is a big one. The last, on the road in December of last year, he went off for 132 yards on only 4 receptions. He's only reached the end zone in 1 of his 8 previous games versus the Jags. It was in 2014, but he's as good a shot as anybody in this offense and against this team, the Jacksonville Jags. Philip Dorsett, I'll give a B grade to. With Dante Moncrief out, Dorsett is the man in the Colts' 2 wide receiver sets that they employ more often than not. He'll continue to take a backseat to Hilton in terms of target share, but he should get plenty of opportunities against a weak Jacksonville secondary. The tight ends, here's the deal. I think the better of the two, Jack Doyle, second on the team in targets last week, was tied for second in week 2 and scored 2 touchdowns on 3 targets in week 1. Seems to be a slightly better fantasy producer when compared to Dwayne Allen, who I'm giving a C+ to. I actually like both Colts tight ends in this matchup. I wouldn't hesitate to start them both if no better options are available. Over to the Jags, Blake Bortles, an A grade, threw for a total of 548 yards and 4 scores in 2015, while also scoring on a rushing TD in the team's December matchup. No turnovers either. Fire him up against one of the league's weakest secondaries in the Colts. Chris Ivory, I'm giving a B grade too. He should be able to improve on his paltry 1.2 yards per carry in week 3 against a Colts front 7 that has given up nearly 100 yards per game on the ground to their opponents, a total of 4 rushing touchdowns on the season. TJ Eldon, just going to leave him on the bench. He's looked downright awful, both as a bell cow and as a complementary piece to the Jags' rushing attack. The receivers, Allen Robinson, an A. He was fed 11 targets in week 3. We all saw the outcome of this, 57 yards receiving 2 touchdowns. Similar opportunity here against Indy. Allen Hurns, a B, splitting opportunities with the Jags' number 3 guy, Marquise Lee. And though he's usually good for a couple downfield shots per game, he's generally a boom or bust guy in your lineup. For as bad as the Colts are in the defensive backfield, you got to believe if there was a week Hurns could get it done, it'd be this week. He did, by the way, go over 100 yards and a score in each of his 2 matchups against Indy in 2015. Marquise Lee, I mentioned, I'll give a C grade too. He's seeing a good number of targets, enough to warrant consideration, but only in a flex, only in desperation. Julius Thomas, a B-. Bortles has opted to go to his wide receivers before he looks at Thomas, which is unfortunate because he's a crazy mismatch for virtually anyone that tries to cover him man-to-man. He's fared well against the Jags in the past, scoring in 3 of his 4 matchups against them. One of those was as a member of the Denver Broncos.
All right, on to the Titans-Texans. Quarterback Marcus Mariota. He's going to get a C grade here. Houston had the number 1 pass defense, and while they will be without J.J. Watt hitting that IR, I don't expect it to take up too much in the passing game, especially since it is Mariota. A squeak over 200 for his yards per game. Running back DeMarco Murray is getting an A. Houston's given up 125 per game on the ground. Titans have the 8th best rushing attack through 3 games. So fire up DeMarco Murray on the A here. Wide receiver Tajay Sharp, B-. He's still without a touchdown. We hear that name, we say, wow, he's awesome. Look at stats. You don't have a touchdown. You don't have a touchdown through 3 games. You're probably not on my roster.
You know what he does have, though? Field time, and a lot of it. He's on the field for 97% of Titans offensive plays. No other wide receiver on the Titans roster is on the field more than 50% of the time.
And still can't get a touchdown.
He will eventually. Keep
He
with
will
it.
eventually. Keep with it, says Andy, but you can have my B- and I'll be right. A shocking stat is he's only averaging 11 yards per carry, and I expected his to be a little bit higher until I looked at Rashard Matthews, who's getting a C. He has 9.8 yards per catch and also without a touchdown. So you have to start to wonder if this Titans offense is really going to start getting it done for your fantasy football lineup. Andre Johnson, only Titans receiver to have a touchdown is Andre Johnson. He's caught like 4 passes and one of them were a touchdown. So I'm giving him a D, so let's not even go there yet. Tight end Delanie Walker, questionable. Watch out, but expect him to play. So let's give him a C for Delanie Walker. I'm only giving him that C.
Wow.
I really am. I want to give him, but when you break it all out and you spread it all out there, that production is not there, especially if you're being questionable coming back into the lineup. So temper expectations for Walker this week against Houston. Quarterback Brock Osweiler on the other side of the ball, I'm giving him a B. I was hoping Brock would develop a little bit faster. I'm hoping he's just a late bloomer. He does have more interceptions than scores, but he's going to get his B grade based on the Titans' deficiencies over his efficiencies. Running back Lamar Miller's getting an A. Average run offense here meets an average run defense. 310 yards for Lamar Miller combined offense, and on his 10 receptions as well. So he is really their second option in the offense at this point for the Texans. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins, B+. He's averaged just over 70 yards per game and has 2 touchdowns. So he is doing okay. We talked about him kind of regressing from his huge year last year. He is in terms of yardage, but touchdowns are still there. So that's good for Hopkins. Will Fuller, he's going to get a B. He has more yards on less receptions than his counterpart, but he is missing the touchdown. I expect his yardage to maintain, but he's going to definitely have that lower touchdown total than Hopkins will come the end of the year. Pretty much that's it for the Titans there. Jalen Strong, Fedorowicz, Ryan Griffin, the second tight end, he actually has 11 receptions compared to C.J. Fedorowicz's 2. Mm-hmm. So if you were forced to play a tight end, I'd do Ryan Griffin over C.J. Fedorowicz. Sorry, Iowa.
I would hope you have a better option, however.
Yeah, I hope you have a better option.
We still have a lot of ground to cover here over these 2 hours. We thank you for listening. Brian and I have the bargain bin upcoming, the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker. We'll wrap up today's show. Pop quiz, 3 of fantasy's toughest questions. We're going to hit those throw them right at Brian here in just a little while.
Can't wait.
No preparation whatsoever. He has not had a look at these questions, so we'll be doing that. And more matchups as well. We'll continue breaking them down, including Buffalo and New England coming up here in just a bit. Are there any starters on the Bills' side of the ball this week?
No.
Well, I have the answer to that question.
Is that a pop quiz question? I'm already 1 for 1. I'm doing great.
It is not a pop quiz question. It was just a tease. We'll call that a tease in this business.
Very well.
And this is not a tease. Delanie Walker will perform much better than your C grade this week.
C for Delanie Walker.
There's just no way. Who else have they got to throw to there in Tennessee?
They're not going to get a chance to throw.
That's a good point. All right, more matchups, and more fun coming up. The 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio in Des Moines. You can also hear the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. More matchups. We begin with Cleveland at Washington. And on the Browns side, Cody Kessler is a C+. The Redskins are giving up over 300 passing yards per game. And while I don't expect Kessler to reach that milestone, I do think he can have some success against a defensive backfield that is banged up and takes too many unnecessary risks in coverage. Isaiah Crowell, a B grade. Washington yields over 4.5 yards per carry through 3 games, has given up 7 rushing touchdowns. Could be a chance here for a multi-score day from Isaiah Crowell. Duke Johnson, a C grade, may get some play as a pass catcher, but at least thus far hasn't been enough to warrant plugging him into your starting lineup. Maybe in a PPR league, but I don't think I would even start him there. Terrell Pryor, a B grade of all the Browns pass catchers, has the highest upside and in all likelihood will lead the team in targets again this weekend, even though it's probable he's going to be covered by Mr. Josh Norman of the Washington Redskins, which is a tough matchup for anybody. Gary Barnidge, a C grade, been a massive dumpster fire through 3 games. I'm giving him one more chance against an opponent that has never had good luck slowing opposing tight ends. If Barnidge can't put up a decent stat line here, it might be time to say goodbye.
That's got to break your heart, right?
Yeah. I mean, I made my call, but long-term success was not guaranteed in that call.
No, it wasn't.
When the Redskins have the ball, Kirk Cousins, an A grade. I think he's going to be one of the top 5 QBs this week. Cleveland stinks defending the pass. A matchup like this is just what Cousins needs to get him back on track and closer to the QB mini drafted as their number 1 in drafts over the summer. Matt Jones, I'll give a B grade to, begrudgingly. Looks like he's the bell cow in this matchup, though I've been a very vocal opponent to him in his game. I do like Jones a bit this week against the Browns defense that currently ranks 18th in the league against opposing runners. Chris Thompson, a C grade, maybe some flex consideration if you're in a full PPR league, otherwise not much to see here. Deshawn Jackson, an A, very limited history against Cleveland, nothing recent, so we have to forecast him by his 2016 performances. And you're absolutely plugging him in this week if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jameson Crowder, a B grade. Would definitely consider him in a half or full PPR league as a wide receiver 2 or flex. It's a great matchup for him, especially since he'll likely avoid coverage by the one bright spot that the Browns have on defense, and that's corner Joe Hayden. Pierre Garçon, I'm going to leave on the bench. He's just a straight possession guy, aging. Don't see any upside there. Jordan Reed, though, an A grade. Seeing volume, just not translating into scores yet. Be patient. It will happen.
On to the Seahawks-Jets. Quarterback Russell Wilson, we talked about that ankle and knees, and he was putting all sorts of equipment on last week on his lower body, trying to keep everything steady. Doesn't matter to me, giving him a C. He's still questionable because of that ankle, and he's going to be under constant duress. And you have got to think that the Jets are really going to target those ankles. They tackle him, they're going to twist him, they're going to do this or that. It's going to slow him down. Russell Wilson is best when he's mobile. He will not be that mobile. So not a good Sunday to be Russell Wilson. Running back Christine Michael, heard the situation there with C.J. Spiller getting signed, but I'm giving Christine Michael a B. I don't like the odds of any Seattle running back here. Jets are really good against the run. I don't like what's going to happen. However, nobody predicted Christine Michael was going to be doing as good as he has been this far.
No, long term, he's actually great. And, I have been as strong and, again, very strong opponent of Christine Michaels. Yeah. I've never been a fan of his, but I'll tell you what, I watched him run last weekend.
Yeah, it's real deal. So we have to assume that he's going to be able to put up a decent line against those New York Jets. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin, C. Again, the C here, it's just tied to Russell Wilson. You have to kind of take all this with a grain of salt. As much as I want to give Baldwin a higher, it's not going to. The Jets defense is going to step up, make Russell Wilson make those short throws. Not a lot of confidence in Baldwin or Curse, who gets a C-. Tyler Lockett's in the same boat. However, I will be brave and say Jimmy Graham is a B+. If anyone is going to catch passes while Wilson is under duress and unable to be mobile and sneak out from a potential sack, he's probably going to check that ball down to Jimmy Graham. So if Wilson is under that pressure, check down to Graham. Graham scores points, B+.
That was one of my big calls from last week was Jimmy.
Yeah. So on to the other side of the ball, quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, C+. He got routed last week, and he plays the number 1 defense in the league this week. I'm not starting him, but Fitz could have a decent bounce-back game at home, but I don't think so against the Legion of Boom. I think they're going to bring it, and they're going to get Fitz all riled up just like he was. Running back Matt Forte, B. Forte has shown for years in Chicago that when everyone else is bad or injured, Forte will still get 80 yards somehow. So Forte is a B. Wide receiver Brandon Marshall, B-. He's just going to be forced into double coverage. It's not looking good for him.
Plus, he's not completely healthy.
Yeah, he's not healthy. So the Legion of Boom is going to be shoving him around, bumping him here or there. We heard about Decker, whether he's going to be able to go or not. So there's just anybody on the Jets side is just not looking good. Inunwa, I'm giving Inunwa a C because of, we just talked about where he is in that tight end role where he will be playing those options and is getting those targets. However, I'm going to give Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I'm going to do this little disclaimer here.
He's not ready. He's not going to play.
You don't think so?
No, he'll be a scratch. He won't play.
If he does.
Inun was the play.
Okay, so Inun was the play. But just in case, long term, I think ASJ is going to have a really sizable role in this offense, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Very interesting. Yeah, long term, I'm not going to disagree with you yet, but it's going to take some time to get there. Yeah, we've been disagreeing a lot today. I'm a little salty today. I don't know. Buffalo at New England. When the Bills have the ball, Tyrod Taylor, I'm just going to leave him on the bench. Houston has a handful of really good offensive weapons, right? Lamar Miller, DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, and they were shut out by this Patriots defense in Week 3. I'm largely staying away from the Bills this week. Lesean McCoy, I'll give a C+ to a sheer volume play. Don't expect much positive production from McCoy, the Bills' lone bright spot on offense. Worth noting that in 3 career matchups versus New England, he has scored touchdowns in 2 of them. Robert Woods, a C grade. He scored in 4 of 6 matchups against the Patriots, but has never topped 78 receiving yards against them. Charles Clay's your tight end, a C grade. Should see enough targets to consider him in a pinch, but I'm not in love with it. On the Patriots side, Jimmy Garoppolo, a B grade. Looked very sharp before getting hurt. Play calling when he's under center is relatively conservative. Don't expect massive numbers. The coaches are more concerned with accuracy with him, but he should be relatively accurate. He'll give you a halfway decent day from a fantasy standpoint if you start him. And I'm guessing Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the guy under center this week. So Legarrette Blunt, an A grade. When the game script is in favor of the Patriots, Blunt gets fed. He should see over 20 touches here and goal line work. That's a great play. James White, a C grade. Scored twice against these Bills in November of last year, but typically doesn't get a lot of work if the Pats are ahead, which they should be the majority of, if not all of this matchup. Julian Edelman, an A grade. He's got the Bills' number. He averaged 10 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown in his 2 2015 head-to-head matchups. I like Julian Edelman. Danny Amendola, a B-, got some flex appeal this week, considering it's likely Jimmy G under center, and he tends to favor those Amendola routes, those short crossing routes over the middle. Nice and easy passes. Amendola will be wide open. Garoppolo gets his high percentage of completions, and all is good in the world of New England. Rob Gronkowski, I have a feeling he's back this week. I know last week was kind of tough for his owners.
Yeah,
really tough.
I started him and got a 0 and still won.
I hear you. Well, and I had several people on Twitter ask me about Rob Gronkowski. My advice, and it's well documented on our Twitter feed at 515 Fantasy. I said if it were me, I'm not playing him this week.
It wasn't you, it was me. So I played him.
But here in week 4, I mean, he's got a nice matchup against the Bills. I'm giving him an A grade. If he's anywhere near 100%, and I think he will be, you have to play him against a Bills defense that has, historically speaking, allowed 10 touchdowns to him in 9 previous matchups.
Good news for me.
It's wonderful news if you're a Gronk owner. Yeah, I mean, this has been a slog, is the only word I can come up with, waiting for him to finally get healthy enough to hit the field and be a worthwhile fantasy producer.
Yeah, it's one of those things. So my kind of situation is I'm 2-1 without him at this point, and he was my number 1 pick because Antonio Brown was my keeper. I'm 2-1 without my number 1 pick. He comes back. I'm pretty excited. You get that nice boost in your points. You get that. So now I'm be a force to be reckoned with here pretty soon.
Yeah, it'll be a decent return, I think, this week for Gronk. Last week was kind of that, I don't know, feeling out process.
See how sore he was going to be, stuff like that. Sure. Yeah.
But having him on the field is there's a mental advantage to that. I think Belichick's into that sort of thing, don't you think?
Oh, the Lions used Kelvin Johnson as a decoy numerous times when he was injured. They just wanted him to run routes, and Stafford just looks in that direction. It rolled coverage every single time, and it worked like a charm.
Plenty more still to come this episode of the show, including the pop quiz. One more segment of matchups upcoming before we get there. You are listening to 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio in Des Moines, on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. Wherever you're finding us, we thank you for checking the show out. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eichenberry. We're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football. We're also on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. My handle on Twitter, at Andy Hall Radio. His is at Ike FFB. That's IKE. FFB. Back into the matchups, Brian.
All right, Panthers-Falcons. Quarterback Cam Newton, B+. Cam's going to get it done. He's going to have a couple TDs either through the air or running or both, so he might have 4. I don't expect that performance he did last week. When I was watching parts of that game, he was like getting sacked and just chucked the ball up in the air, and he was doing all this stupid stuff.
Yeah, the Atlanta defense is not the Minnesota defense.
Yeah, so that's not going to happen, and you know that he took some in the locker, took some licks in the locker room for that kind of performance. Running back Fadi Whitaker. Never in my fantasy football career did I ever think I was going to be talking Fozzie Whitaker.
Waka, waka, waka.
Waka, waka. I love Muppet Babies, man. That was awesome. That was one of my favorite cartoons.
This just goes to show the generational difference. You bring up Muppet Babies.
I had the Muppets,
The
yes.
Muppet Show was my
I had
generation.
the Muppet Show, yes.
I'm old.
But the Muppet Babies were such an awesome cartoon.
Yeah, it was kind of past my time, man. I definitely was more of a Muppet Show guy.
Of course. Anyway, Fozzie Whitaker, I'm going to be brave and I'm going to toss out that A-. I'm going to throw the reputation out there. I'm throwing an A- Fozzie Whitaker.
Over Cameron Artis-Payne, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
You know, you looked at that. It's not there. It's Fozzie. You know, it's going to happen.
He's
man.
a dual threat guy, so I'll give you credit there. I mean, it's not a bad pick. It's just the running backs in Carolina never score because Cam Newton does.
However, you got to think Cam's got he's going to be a little bit more under control this week after what happened last week. So let Fozzie have his day. Wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin, B+. He has 3 touchdowns, but not great yardage. That could change. He's always going to be that TD hog in that red zone threat. But I'm expecting Kelvin Benjamin to get a little bit better yardage here this week. Ted Ginn Jr., B-. Not likely to get his touchdown or a ton of yards either. But if you do have somebody on bye and you need somebody you can't think of, Ted Ginn's a safe bet. He's averaging nearly 20 yards per catch. Sounds insane. But reality is he only has 6 catches, so that's 2 a game.
This is a guy that scored 10-plus touchdowns last year.
He went bonkers. So against this defense, this might be the week to slide in Ted Ginn Jr. Funchess, don't even think about it. He's only got 28 yards this year. Greg Olsen, this is his kind of matchup. This is his kind of game. Divisional opponent. He's due for his big breakout to make you, the tight end owner, happy. Quarterback Matt Ryan on the Falcons side of the ball, he's getting a B+. I can't quite hook him up with an A here because of the Carolina defense. His offense has some lingering injuries, but he is at home, and they play way better at home. And, oh, by the way, there is that 7 touchdown and 1 interception ratio he has going on, which is nice because it's always bad when your quarterback loses you points as you're going through the day. Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman, both getting B. Was last week a fluke when Freeman just went bonkers? I think so. Freeman and Coleman nearly split carries, but their production was vastly different. However, their carries have been relatively similar through the other 2 weeks. So I don't expect it all of a sudden to just change into Freeman being the workhorse now because he had a really good game. It might just be a roll of the dice, but I'm kind of expecting them to split carries again. Whoever gets it, gets it. Wide receiver Julio Jones. I'm all in for Julio here. I think he's going to be fine. He's technically listed as questionable, but I think he's been questionable all season long. So that's not scaring me off of this one. I think he's going to have some good yardage, even though he has 180 through 3 games, but he does have those 2 touchdowns. So he has a knack for showing up in big home games. Wide receiver Mohamed Sanu, B-. He had that shoulder thing there, B- because of confidence for me. If he lands wrong again, that shoulder's going to go, and he's going right back out of your lineup. So if you're kind of a fence with some other wide receiver, give the hat tip to a different wide receiver in your lineup. Be a little hesitant on Sanu with that shoulder injury. Tight end Jacob Tamme here, I'm giving him a B. Previously thought he was going to be the low person on the totem pole, but he has more yards than Sanu and 11 receptions. So be thinking of him more in your tight end lineup.
Oakland at Baltimore. For the Raiders, Derek Carr, a B+. When these two teams met in 2015, Carr threw for 351 yards, 3 touchdowns with only 1 INT. The Ravens have looked a lot better thus far in 2016, currently ranking third against opposing passers, giving up only 168 passing yards per game and just over 1 touchdown per game on average. But that was against the Bills, the Browns, and the Jags. I like Carr plenty here. Latavius Murray, a B-. Got a couple things working against him here. Number one, that shared backfield. And number two, a tough matchup. The Ravens give up less than 4 yards per carry, have only allowed 2 rushing scores through 3 games. Jalen Richard, or Richard, however you say his name, a C grade. This timeshare really has no rhythm to it yet. Until we figure out the splits, it's best to just keep him parked on your bench. Same with DeAndre Washington, the talented rookie, also getting a C grade here. Amari Cooper, a B+, getting 25% of the team's passing targets, slightly ahead of Crabtree, who I'm giving a B to this week. Crabtree, 21% of the team's passing targets. He and Cooper account for nearly half of all Derek Carr throws through the first 3 weeks. Clive Walford, a C grade, still waiting for his breakout, likely will not come in this matchup. On the Ravens side, Joe Flacco, an A-. Yet another cake matchup on paper. Flacco had plenty of success in the 2015 head-to-head, throwing for 384 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 INT. There's no reason he shouldn't be able to yield that sort of production this week. Justin Forsett, a B grade. Oakland is pretty terrible against the run. Though they are improved, they're still not very good. They're giving up nearly 5.5 yards per carry, and though they've only allowed 2 rushing scores through 3 games, they do hemorrhage fantasy production to pass-catching backs like Forsett, was on the field for nearly 65% of the Ravens' offensive snaps in Week 3, trending upward. Terrence West, a C+. He's in the mix as a flex if you have no other options. Mike Wallace, a B+, been money in the bank against some very sketchy defensive backfields and should have no problem exploiting Oakland in that same fashion. Steve Smith, a B grade, team target share leader with just over 20% of Joe Flacco's throws headed his direction. Should be able to translate that into bigger fantasy days as we go forward. And Dennis Pitta, a B grade, currently ranks 6th in team target share among all other tight ends. That's legit, and he should most definitely be in your starting lineup.
Lions-Bears, quarterback Matt Stafford, he's getting the obvious A here. Third best passing offense in the NFL, guy who isn't afraid to push the ball. Oh, and by the way, they play the Bears. It's likely going to be another big day for Stafford, 300 and 2 or 3 touchdowns. Running back Theo Riggs getting a B+. I love Riddick in this matchup, run ability and pass-catching ability. He's the guy. I do not buy in, as we talked about earlier, the Dwayne Washington hype. I just don't. I follow beat writers. I understand what's going there. I'm not buying it. Drop in Riddick. Full confidence. B+. Golden Tate, B-. He's been a non-factor, but don't drop him. Don't overreact. I have seen people drop Golden Tate. Why? Why would you drop somebody? You drafted him high, likely. He is technically the number 1 in the third best passing offense. So don't ever drop a receiver like that. He'll come out of it. Once defenses figure out how to cover Jones and Bolden, Golden Tate's catches will go up. It's going to work out. Marvin Jones, B+, number 1 in yardage after that monster week last week of over 200. He has proven to be the guy to own, which we talked about in our preseason shows, that Marvin Jones was easily the better value there. Anquan Bolden's going to get a C. Not yardage, but he gets those 2 touchdowns already this year, so he's a good bye-week stash if you need one. Eric Ebron's getting a B. Much more reliable hands, red zone threat, but he only has 1 touchdown. Quarterback Brian Hoyer on the Bears side. Cutler is technically listed as questionable, but I don't see it yet. Either way, you probably aren't going to start either one of these guys, even on that bye-week vacancy there. Hoyer is going to get the C. Running back Jordan Howard, that's who's going for the Bears right now. D. Kadeem Carey, D. Even though the Lions linebacker core is battered and bruised, the Bears will likely be playing from behind, so expect them to abandon the run quickly and just be chucking the ball all over the place. Wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey, going to give him a B. A little banged up. He's going to be shadowed by Slade, but by sheer volume, he's going to get tons of looks. So be watching for Alshon Jeffrey in garbage time. Also Kevin White, giving him a B-. He hasn't shown very much right now, but I like his chances. Eddie Royal, C. Zach Miller, the tight end there, C+. He has 2 touchdowns, so odds of him getting another one aren't that bad.
No, I kind of like him with Brian Hoyer under center.
Yeah.
And for that matter, did you see the number of targets Kevin White got last week? He only brought in like 2 catches, but it was like 11 targets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, wow, Kevin White out of nowhere. So, yeah, I mean, you know what they need to do, the Bears? They just need to chuck the ball up like the Vikings did in 98. Throw it up there.
Just chuck it.
See if Alshon and Kevin can come down with it.
Might as well.
Well, that's how the game script's going to go for the Bears the rest of the season.
Yes, it is.
Everybody's favorite segment is coming up.
Uh-oh.
It's not Brian's, though. The pop quiz, and the reason being Brian has no idea what I'm going to ask him. I'm just going to throw these questions at him in rapid-fire fashion and hope that he gets them right. He's only gone 3 for 3 once.
Twice.
Once. Pop quiz is next on 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You can also get us on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. Again, no matter how you found us, we appreciate the fact that you're here. You're investing your time. We're doing our best and have done a lot of research this week and every week to make sure you're getting some top-notch intel from both Brian and myself. But, Brian,
Oh, boy.
we like to stretch out every once in a while.
I do.
Do something fun. And the pop quiz is just that. 3 of fantasy's toughest questions coming at you, and you have no idea what I'm about to ask.
Nope, but that's usual, and 3 for 3. Here we go.
Yeah, right. No matter what, here's the deal for those of you that are new to the show. Brian is a brilliant fantasy mind, but
It gets hosed.
these are really tough questions. And no matter what Brian responds with as an answer, I come back and give you the correct answer afterwards. Question number 1, Brian. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman ranked 1 and 2, respectively, at the running back position in half PPR leagues in Week 3. I'm not sure I've ever seen that happen before. Is the correct course of action on these two to own Freeman, own Coleman, own both, or own neither?
So a knee-jerk reaction, I'm going to say own neither. Because if you can dump them, dump them. If you can get...
It's a lot of production.
It's a lot of production, but it's inconsistent production. And that's my issue. Trust me, everybody loves monster games where you got 200 yards. Beautiful. But fantasy football is over 13 weeks for a reason. Because it is the long-term game. It is consistency. And if you can dump Freeman for a consistent receiver, then you probably just made out pretty good.
Which I've done in one of our leagues.
Indeed.
Although I'm not as bearish as you are on Freeman, I'm still pretty bullish on the guy. But the answer here is own neither.
Yay!
Game script was about as ideal as it could be last week versus New Orleans. One of the league's worst defenses. We have a pretty good idea outside of that outlier of how this backfield could go over the course of the season. And it's not pretty for either guy. The Falcons' next 3 opponents, Brian, are Carolina, Denver, and Seattle.
Ruh-roh SpaghettiOs.
They have the Packers in Week 8. They're currently the number 1 team against the run. They have the Cardinals in Week 12, the Chiefs in Week 13, the Rams in Week 14, and the Panthers again in Week 16, which, by the way, is Mini League's Fantasy Championship Week. Sell high on both Freeman and Coleman and do it now.
Bamboozled.
1 for 1. Question number 2 is an over-under.
Ooh, I like these.
50-50.
I like these.
I'm making it easy on you. With Le'Veon Bell returning from suspension this week, we set D'Angelo Williams' projected touches at 10. Are you taking the over or the under?
That's tough because we're not counting receptions.
Touches.
Yep.
That includes receptions.
No, to me it doesn't.
Yes,
Okay.
it does.
So if it does, then I'm totally taking the over now.
In official statistics, touches are touches, whether they're rushes or catches.
Well, I'm
Those are
definitely
touches.
taking the over then.
Okay.
I don't think Le'Veon Bell's coming back. He's not going to be in there for 85% of the run plays or any of the plays for that matter. It's going to be a warm-up game for him. You can't just drop someone in week 3, 4, whatever it is now.
But they did it last year.
But they did it last year. But I don't expect it. I just don't see that happening. 10 touches includes receptions. I'm going over.
Over 10. The answer's over. The Steelers will have learned from their mistake in 2015, allowing Bell roughly 90% of the backfield time and touches once he returned to the field from suspension. Of course, it was less than 6 games later that Bell would suffer a season-ending knee injury that allowed Williams back into the lineup, and ultimately he finished as fantasy's number 4 running back in half PPR leagues. They know what they've got in Williams. He will touch the ball more than 10 times this week at home versus the Chiefs, a relatively tough run defense. Absolutely nailed that one. I'm surprised.
For dose.
I'm surprised. I'm going to give you credit and say good for you, but I didn't think there was any way in hell you were getting that one right.
Nailed it. Well, that's why I had to clarify, because if it was just rushing attempts, rushing touches, I would have said under.
Granted, a lot of what we do here in terms of forecasting is based on what teams have done in the past or players have done in the past. It's all historical data, plus, you're forecasting a bit. So all we have to go on with this Bell-Williams situation is what they did last year. But
Yep.
I think they learned a valuable lesson last year that Williams shouldn't just be put on the shelf when Bell returns. As valuable as Bell could be.
Yeah, why would you? That's stupid.
Well, I think that Bell has the potential of being the best player in all of fantasy football.
I don't know either of them, so you should probably just throw it to Antonio Brown 42 times.
I like Antonio Brown a lot. But I think that Bell has the potential, whereas Williams does not, of being like the top overall producing fantasy player.
Question 3, please.
You're over this one, huh?
Did you like that sultry voice there?
I don't know what you're talking about. Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Trevor Simeon. All of them are currently QB1s.
Yeah, dude.
Do any of the 3 of them finish the season as a QB1?
So I've been higher on Wentz than the other 2. I definitely don't think it's Simeon, so I'll scratch him out of there. That leaves Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz.
But why are you scratching Simeon? You saw what he did against the Bengals last week.
Yeah.
Over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, come on. Why are you scratching him?
I'm scratching my chin too. I just don't see it long term in Denver. I don't have confidence in that offense to maintain that kind of passing production. I mean, who would have thought Emmanuel Sanders? No one even had Emmanuel Sanders in their lineup, and he throws up that kind of game. So I expect that to be the same. Dak Prescott, on the other hand, oh, man. So what was the exact wording of your question again?
Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott, Trevor Simeon are all currently QB1s. Do any of the 3 of them finish the season as a QB1?
I will say yes. I will say Dak and Wentz will finish as QB1s.
Both of them?
Both. Yeah, that's why I needed that clarification, so I didn't have to pick between one of the 2.
Tell me why Dak is in the top 12.
Dak is in the top 12 because of his supporting cast. He has the line. He has the emergency lifelines, Cole Beasley. He has these people that he is making smart decisions to and checking out of it. Dak is not launching the ball down the field. He's not going those deep shots. Jason Garrett is setting him up for success long term, I definitely believe. Now, we're assuming Romo doesn't come back. So Romo is going to come back.
You're assuming that.
Well, so let's just, hypothetical, say he doesn't come back. That would be why I would pick Dak. Because if Romo comes back in week 8, no, Dak's not going to. But if I had to do a surefire one, it's Wentz. That guy's taking shots downfield. He looks like a 5-year vet out there on the NFL field. It's amazing.
The answer is no.
You're nuts.
No. Neither one of them. They're all borderline as is. They're all huddled there at the end of the QB12 equation. So you have to keep in mind that there are a couple of quarterbacks below them, one including Tom Brady, that will usurp those players from the top 12.
Anyone who's agreeing with you right now also needs to remember that you placed RG3 as a QB2.
He would have been had he not gotten hurt.
No.
Trevor Simeon, the problem with Trevor Simeon, I like the guy a lot. I picked him up in one of our leagues. I have to play him this week because I own Eli Manning, who's got the Vikings. Don't want to play him. I own Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't want to play him against Seattle. So I had to pick up Trevor Simeon this week. I like his matchup a lot better, and he might actually get something done through the air. But Simeon, it's too run-heavy an offense. As long as C.J. Anderson is healthy, the game plan is going to run through him. Dak Prescott, he doesn't take any downfield shots with Des Bryant's health and with Tony Romo possibly coming back. I don't see that ending up a top 12, and I also don't think Carson Wentz. If you're taking the plunge, I understand it, but I disagree with it. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's no way a rookie quarterback will go through his rookie season and not throw any interceptions, not fumble the ball, be sacked. You know, this guy has largely been kept upright by a pretty stout offensive line there in Philly, and that's to their credit. But also remember, they don't have a whole hell of a lot to throw to in that Philly offense. You know what? Jordan Matthews out of the slot, Nelson Aguilar, who's underperformed, Zach Ertz when he comes back. And then they've got all this stable of running backs. And for that reason, I think Carson Wentz will never truly be a QB1 this season.
I respectfully disagree.
Well, the correct answer is no. So you went 2 for 3 today. Congratulations.
I went 3 for 3. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
You say 3 for 3, but you go ahead and take that home with you,
all night long.
We have more matchups to get to. Don't forget, if you're in a pinch and you need somebody off your waiver wire, Brian and I have one quarterback, one running back, one pass catcher each that we call the bargain bin. We'll hit those at the near the end of the show, and of course, give you the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker to wrap things up as well. But coming up, as I said, more matchups. We'll get into the grades and all of that in just a bit on 515 Fantasy Football Show. You are listening to 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday from 11 to 1 on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines. You can also get us on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. About halfway through the matchups here, we'll dive back in with Denver at Tampa. On the Broncos side, Trevor Simeon, a B+, completing over 65% of his passes through the first 3 games, coming off of his best game as a starter, throwing for 312 yards and 3 touchdowns. No reason you shouldn't feel confident plugging him in if need be, facing a Bucs secondary that has given up 7 passing touchdowns on the season, only picking off 1 enemy pass. Bucs are just not very good. They are better at stopping the run, but they won't be able to stop the bowling ball that is C.J. Anderson. I give C.J. an A grade this week. Good opportunity to turn around the misfortunes of Week 3 against this Bucs front 7. They give up nearly 100 yards per game on the ground to opposing runners. They're currently 3rd in the league among running backs, or he's currently 3rd in the league among running backs with 6 carries inside an opponent's 10-yard line. So love the fact that C.J. is a true bell cow, is involved a little bit in the passing game as well. Speaking of that passing game, Demaryius Thomas, an A-, 8 grabs for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns the last time he faced Tampa. Of course, that was back in 2012. He got out-targeted again last week by Emmanuel Sanders, but with tight end Virgil Green not expected to be in the lineup this week, expect that volume to go up slightly. Speaking of Sanders, a B+ grade, the team targets leader at 31%. Sanders is tied with Arizona's Larry Fitzgerald for total targets inside the 10-yard line with 6. That's a pretty sweet statistic right there. Over to the Bucs side, Jameis Winston, a C grade. Easy to hate this matchup against one of the league's premier defenses. Charles Sims, also a C grade, with Doug Martin not expected to play again this week. Sims will get lots of volume, but it's an incredibly difficult matchup. Mike Evans, a C grade. Don't expect a lot of fantasy fireworks this week. He'll probably be covered by Aqib Talib, one of the best in the business. Cameron Brate, if there was one play on the Tampa side, Cameron Brate, a B-. If any one Tampa pass catcher has a shot in the end zone this week, it'll likely be Brate.
He had a lot of looks last week. I liked it. On to the Rams-Cardinals. Quarterback Case Keenum, D. 174 yards per game. On to the next. Running back Todd Gurley, B, 88 yards per game. And you've seen a general theme here with the Rams offense. We keep waiting for his big game to come. I'm pretty sure I said this twice already this season. He gets production. It's just not top dog production. He's just getting those kind of mediocre RB2, RB3 numbers, and extremely frustrating, especially if he was your keeper in some leagues. On to the wide receivers. Kenny Britt, B-. Tavon Austin, B-. Bradley Marquez, C-. Here's my PSA. Don't buy into the hype of a one-game splash out of Rams receivers. They do it all the time. At some point, someone's going to have 120 and a touchdown.
Yeah, Brian Quick, anybody?
Yeah.
Austin Pettis, anybody?
Yeah, and then everyone runs out, adds them up on their roster, and then 1 week later they drop them again. Because that's what happens. Nobody is consistent in this offense. It's just not there. They don't have the pieces in place to be able to do so. So don't fall for Rams wide receivers having one good game and then going and picking them up. On the Cardinals side of the ball, quarterback Carson Palmer, B+. Rams have an average defense. I expect Palmer to get back on his horse. I'm not overreacting to last week, and neither should you. They're still 11th in the passing offense. It was frustrating to watch Palmer throw those interceptions and watch why do they not have the ball? Watching it, trust me, I get it. Don't overreact. This will be the cure here. David Johnson, he's an A. This guy's absolutely insane. He has over 380 combined yards after 3 weeks and 3 touchdowns. He's still doing his thing. No one's going to stop him from doing it at all. Wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald, B+, 20 catches, 3 touchdowns. Look for Fitz to get back on that horse and compete again with Carson Palmer. Michael Floyd, he is out of that concussion protocol, so he should play. He may be a little bit slower, or if he gets his bell rung again, it could be lights out. So Michael Floyd, B, John Brown, C. Still typically the fourth option in this offense and just not enough production to go around. Tight end Darren Fells, you've seen him make some catches. Some of them were called back. He had some nice catches, but it's nothing to get excited about.
Palmer had a really bad week last week.
Oh, it was so frustrating as a Fitz owner.
Is that a trend, though? I mean, he was trending that way toward the end of last season, and part of that might have been the injury he sustained, but I have some legitimate concerns going forward about Carson Palmer.
Not yet.
Not yet, huh?
Not yet.
Not panicking.
No, you got to expect some of his production drop-off is because of David Johnson's production increase.
Yeah, he's been a stud. No question about that. Number 1 running back in all of fantasy right now. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Tavon Austin, by the way, back to the Rams, when you were talking about the Rams, I saw something on Twitter. What was it? How crazy is it that Tavon Austin is a better running back than Theo Riddick, and Theo Riddick is a better wide receiver than Tavon Austin?
That's pretty legit.
I love that. I thought that was hilarious. Can't remember who it was. Wish I could give him credit. It was on Twitter. It was very funny. New Orleans at San Diego. When the Saints have the ball, Drew Brees, a B grade here. Brees, a much more efficient quarterback in the friendly confines of the Superdome, but he's had incredible luck against the Chargers in years past, throwing 7 touchdowns to only 1 interception in his career against San Diego, averaging over 350 yards passing per game. If the running game has success, it would be prudent to temper your expectation just a bit. Mark Ingram, I'll give him a B grade here. The Chargers have quietly been decent against the run through 3 games, allowing less than 82 yards per game to opposing runners, but they have allowed 4 touchdowns. Ingram ran harder than I've seen him run in a long time in Week 3. Likely he'll get the rock 15 to 20 times if this one stays close, and it might. Brandon Cooks, a B-. More than likely will get a face full of stud corner Jason Verrett all day, lowering my expectation of his ceiling. His floor remains pretty steady, so he's playable, but I wouldn't count on him posting wide receiver 1 numbers. We all saw what happened when an above-average cover corner shadows him with Desmond Trufant last week. It wasn't pretty for Mr. Cooks. Willie Snead, a C+. That toe concerns me. Toe injuries are a mess.
Toes are ridiculous. You can't put them in a cast. You can't isolate them. You can't immobilize them. All you do is the whole foot, but you can still wiggle your toe, and that's what slows them down.
If Snead does play, he's a flex-worthy consideration at best, despite a game that should feature plenty of passing. I love Willie Snead. I own him all over the place. Yeah, he's been great, but boy, this toe thing creeped up, and it's like, oh, that's heartbreaking. But you know who's really happy about that?
Kobe Fleener.
Fleener owners for sure. That was another big call for me last week. Was like,
huge.
On one hand he's downright droppable, but on the other hand, like, ooh, Willie Snead isn't playing.
Injury is opportunity.
Yeah, and it was for Fleener. He's running all those routes now. A B grade this week. He went off as I predicted he would. 7 receptions, 109 yards, and a score. This is not expected each and every week, but certainly when the matchup warrants a start, you should absolutely plug him in. So I was, on one hand, wrong about dropping him, but
injury is opportunity, and that's how it goes in the NFL. That's how a lot of people get their big breaks.
yeah, when I wrote that question, we didn't know Willie Snead was going to be missing time with a toe injury. So, on the Chargers side, Phillip Rivers in A grade. The Saints are one of the league's easiest matchups for an opposing quarterback. For that reason, I see Rivers taking to the air quite a bit here, as he's done in other head-to-head matchups versus New Orleans, throwing 5 touchdown passes and an average of about 350 yards in 2 games. Melvin Gordon, a B+, handling over 85% of the team's snaps and nearly 90% of the team's rushing opportunities and receiving chances out of the backfield. Gordon should be money in the bank against the Saints defense that got smoked by the combination of Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman last week. Dexter Mccluster, how about a C grade on Mccluster? In the conversation for a flex spot due to the Saints' inability to stop pass-catching running backs with speed, that is how I would describe Dexter Mccluster. Tyrell Williams, an A grade. I'm seeing a few more targets for him than Travis Benjamin. I think Williams is actually the better play against the Saints secondary, but I don't hate Travis Benjamin this week. I give him a B grade. He'll get his, no doubt, but could potentially hurt your squad if he doesn't reach the end zone. That's usually the trick with Travis Benjamin. And with Hunter Henry, a C grade, rookie tight ends are tough to trust, but he did make the most of the few targets he did see in week 3, while Antonio Gates continues to nurse an injury. A bonus pop quiz question real quick. We have about 1 minute, Brian. Is Antonio Gates droppable?
No, not yet. I mean, he's there, but not quite yet. Not quite yet, because you know they're going to, when it gets towards the end of the season, he's not at that record. You know they're going to force it to him.
I am dropping him in spots.
Mm-hmm. So,
because I have other players that I think
if you've got the room,
offer upside like Dennis Pitta.
Yep.
I would rather own a Dennis Pitta than
at this
Antonio
point,
Gates,
yes.
And that's a big target thing, is what it is basically. There was another one that I was going to hit you with too. It was like another quick hitting question. Oh, you know what? You know who it had to do with? Marvin Jones. Because we executed a trade in one of the leagues Brian and I are in together, where I gave up Devonta Freeman, who I've been wanting to unload, and this owner needed a running back and had a plethora of wide receivers, and so I asked for Marvin Jones, who, by the way, is fantasy's #1 scoring wide receiver in half PPR leagues right now.
On the Detroit Lions.
A Detroit Lion.
Not named Calvin Johnson.
He was a Bengal. He is now a Lion. I think this offense fits him to a T. I think Stafford and him have a great connection already. And I think in this role as a #1 wide receiver, which he never would have had in Cincinnati because of A.J. Green, he's flourishing, and he'll finish as a wide receiver 1, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, barring anything bad happening to him, I think Marvin Jones is in for a top 12 season easily. Yep. No question. Well, one more segment of matchups upcoming, including a really, really tough Sunday night game. Kansas City, Pittsburgh. How's that one going to go? I will tell you in a bit. Reminder, we'll wrap up the show with bargain bin picks from both Brian and myself in case you're in a pinch at the quarterback, running back, or pass-catching positions. The 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker is coming up as well. This is 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. We appreciate you taking a listen. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio in Des Moines, on iTunes, on Stitcher, online at espndesmoines.com. Andy Hall, Brian Eikenberry, one more segment of matchups. Hit it, my friend.
We're going to do the Dallas Cowboys at the San Francisco 49ers. Quarterback Dak Prescott, just talked about him a little bit ago, B+, 700 yards, 3 total touchdowns, only 1 through the air. This might be the fix he needs to increase his touchdown output and snag some more. Looking for Dak to make a good show here. Running back Ezekiel Elliott, A. Zeke is a beast. Fumbles be darned, don't let it deter you from starting Ezekiel Elliott. Guy's a stud. 300 combined yards and 3 touchdowns right now as a rookie running back, as we predicted, as everybody predicted, just because of the situation he's in. He is awesome. Wide receiver Des Bryant, B+. If he goes.
No way he's playing.
No way he's playing. No way he's playing week 1. But you never know. It comes around game time decision. There's reports where he's just in crutches. He's not putting any weight on his knee. Who knows? Let's see. They're overall optimistic, but I'm not completely sold on it. So watch out for Des Bryant game time decision. Wide receiver Terrence Williams is going to get a B. Technically, he's the number 2, but Cole Beasley should be the number 2 to me. So Cole Beasley is the leading receiver on the Cowboys.
Yeah, he'll be the most targeted for sure.
Yeah. So Dak's been practicing with the offseason with the second team, so it totally makes sense why these two have that awesome connection. They already have their rapport, so plug him in a flex. You need that starter. You've got some people you're not quite sure about. Cole Beasley. Tight end Jason Witten, B-. Not much of a yard gobbler as I expected him to be, so there's no need for emergency blanket when and Dak and Zeke are cool as cucumbers there. So I was high on Witten a little bit ago, then I came back down to reality here. Quarterback Blaine Gabbert, B-. Look at the Cowboys. Their pass defense is 22nd in the league. If there was ever an opportunity for Blaine Gabbert to make that leap and put up some fantasy football numbers, this is it. Running back Carlos Hyde, B+. 4 total touchdowns here for Carlos Hyde. He has been rewarding to patient owners that were not deterred by the Niners tag by his name. He may not snag you 100 yards, but he is making up for in goal line touches. Wide receiver Torrey Smith, C. Quentin Patton, D. Burbridge, D. Any of these pass catchers make sense to anybody out there? No. All 3 of these receivers aren't great. They shouldn't be in your starting lineup. They're either old or inexperienced, and just the offensive system, passing-wise, for the Niners is not making sense. It's not working out. So please don't listen to the bargain bin. Grab other people if you are considering starting wide receiver Torrey Smith. That's the end of that quick matchup.
Yardage Gobbler.
Yardage Gobbler.
Reminds me of Number Munchers. The old
was
computer
awesome.
game back in the
The
day.
prime numbers got me every time.
That's funny. The Sunday night tilt, Kansas City at Pittsburgh. Chiefs side of this matchup, Alex Smith, a B grade. The Steelers are allowing the second most passing yards in the league through 3 games, but they only given up 3 passing touchdowns. This, to me, is a perfect snapshot of how Smith's fantasy day should be. Lots of passing yards, maybe only 1 TD, if that, through the air. Spencer Ware, a C+, facing the 4th-ranked rush defense on the road. Not in love with Ware's chances here. The Steelers have held all opposing runners under 4 yards per carry and are middle of the road against pass-catching backs like Ware has shown himself to be. Jeremy Maclin, a B+. The matchup sets up pretty well here for Maclin, who hasn't yet surpassed 68 receiving yards in any one game. Hasn't reached the end zone since week 1. If you've been waiting for a good opportunity to start him in your wide receiver 2 or flex spot, this is the week. Travis Kelce, a B grade. This is also a favorable matchup for him, coming off his best performance of the season, catching 6 passes, 89 yards, and a score in week 3 versus a Jets secondary that is built similarly to Pittsburgh's. He's had exactly 7 targets in each of his 3 games. That is consistency. You got to love that at the tight end position, especially this year. On the Steelers side, Big Ben Roethlisberger, a B grade. He's been shockingly pedestrian in 5 previous head-to-head matchups against the Chiefs, averaging about only 226 passing yards per game, less than 2 touchdowns. Kansas City's opportunistic defensive secondary could lead to negative turnover margin. Still, because of the weapons at his disposal, there is potential for a good fantasy day for Big Ben. Le'Veon Bell, a B+. If the Steelers run the ball 30 times on Sunday night, Bell likely gets at least 20 of those touches, plus backfield receiving work as well. The Chiefs give up over 123 rushing yards per game, but have up to this point only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, changed my mind.
D'Angelo Williams, a B-. He won't be completely ignored like he was after Bell's return in week 3 of last season. Again, my guess is probably about a 65-35% backfield share of the touches. Sounds crazy to say this, but Williams is a serious sleeper candidate at the running back position this week. With all the focus on Bell's return, nobody's thinking about him. Antonio Brown, a B grade, probably sees a lot of Marcus Peters, one of the best corners in the league. But considering Brown's draft day price, you're not considering sitting him. Just don't expect a massive stat line at the end of the day. Sammy Coates, a C+. He's had at least one 40-plus yard reception in each of the Steelers' first 3 games. Just a matter of time before he's able to translate some of those down-the-field shots into scores. Jesse James, a C+. Not sure exactly what to make of his opportunity in this game, but he's huge. He's 6'7", great hands, and most importantly, he's got Big Ben's trust. Chances are there are better options out there, but if you need to start him, and I am actually in one league, there's no reason to feel terrible about it.
I agree. Big guys catch touchdowns. On to the Giants at the Minnesota Vikings. Quarterback Eli Manning, B. Eli has 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, but has good yardage. He's viable. He's not the sneaky play I was hoping for during the season, flying low on people's radars. Running back Orleans Darkwa, B-. Who's left? With Jennings and that thumb, ball security issues, Vereen's out for the year. Might as well load up on Darkwa, but he is going to be against the 7th best run defense, allowing 84 yards per game. Wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., B+. That attitude of his is starting to affect his play, I think, a little bit. Not sure why or where. He's getting great yardage, don't get me wrong, but at some point, you need to have those touchdowns.
I'm surprised he didn't end up in the league's concussion protocol after having a little run-in with the kicking net.
You don't mess with kicker stuff. That's karma. That was karma.
That is karma.
If you don't know what we're talking about, go out there. It's on Facebook. It's all over. OBJ is coming by, swings his helmet, hits the kicking net. He hit the upright on it, and the kicking net flew back, and popped him one right in the chin. It was hilarious.
That's pretty funny.
It was awesome. I loved it. Wide receiver Sterling Shepard, B-. I'd love to give him a high grade here, but the Vikings defense is not to be trifled with and is likely going to be the rookie's hardest matchup yet, so expect a steep learning curve for him. Wide receiver Victor Cruz, B-. I have found, funny stat on Victor Cruz, I have found on some websites that he's not even showing up on the depth chart. You actually have to go into the deep roster to find Victor Cruz, which is hilarious. B-, 70 yards and caught all of his targets last week. I see no reason to hold a grudge against him anymore like I have. Forgive and forget, Victor Cruz, B-. On to the Viking side, quarterback Sam Bradford. I had to do a second guess there. Look at Sam Bradford. And just going to roll off Eagles. B+. He hasn't thrown a pick yet, which is great for Sam Bradford, and the Giants are middle of the pack in passing defense. There have been some flashes, so I'm excited for Sam Bradford this week, B+. Running back Jerick McKinnon, is it Asiata? Giants have a good run defense, and I believe this game will be decided in the air, so I'm giving McKinnon and Asiata a B-, depending on who gets that nod there. I'm not confident in saying it's going to be one or the other at this point. Wide receiver Stephon Diggs, A. He's averaging... He has 300 through 3, over 300 through 3, and a touchdown. There's no reason to think he and Bradford will not continue to connect like they have been. I really like Stephon Diggs. It hurts me to say that, being a Lions guy, but I do. They've shown that they can get it done. He's shown that he can handle that workload and those targets. The other wide receivers, they're getting C's here. It's hard to take a stance on which receiver at this point will get those catches and get those targets, but these guys are both C's. Charles Thielen and however you say that. And,
Adam Thielen?
Yeah, is it Adam?
Charles Johnson?
Yeah, whatever.
How about Kyle Rudolph?
Yep. Well, I do have Rudolph here. Look on Treadwell. So Kyle
Treadwell's not been active for any game yet.
No, I'm just rattling people off in my head now.
Okay.
We started mashing people together. Tight end Kyle Rudolph, B+. He has been this sneaky surprise. Congratulations if you drafted him or picked him up in free agency. I did in one of my leagues. He has 14 catches, 140 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I've really been pleasantly surprised with his draft.
I was invited on the Sleeper Wire podcast a couple of weeks ago with Nick and the fellas. I mentioned that last week, and I was talking up Kyle Rudolph quite a bit, considering Sam Bradford's now in at quarterback, and boy, does he like his tight ends. No question about that. So back with more in just a bit. We're through the matchups at this point, but we still have the bargain bin picks in case you're in need of a dart throw or 2 or 3 or more. We also are going to wrap up with a little something we call the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker, a brainchild of Brian's a few weeks back, and still kind of trying to figure out what the heck it is exactly.
I got topics.
All right. That's all coming up here shortly. Stick around. The 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines each and every Thursday between 11 and 1. You also get the show on iTunes, Stitcher, online at espndesmoines.com, and probably some other places I'm not mentioning.
Yeah, illegally bootleg copies somewhere.
Right.
From your dealer out in the back of the cassettes.
Your pen pal in Sweden.
Yeah.
All right, this is the final segment. We'll begin with the bargain bin picks. One quarterback, one running back, and one pass catcher from Brian and myself. And chances are these are guys that you can pick up right off your waiver wire, plug right in, and expect a decent amount of fantasy production from. Who's your quarterback, Brian?
Quarterback Brock Osweiler. A lot of people were drafting him, picking him up, moving him around. A lot of those people who picked him up have dropped him. Now, subsequently, I gave him a B in our matchups. I expect him to be able to put up some yards there. If you had Aaron Rodgers, go out, check out Brock Osweiler. He's playing the Titans defense.
My quarterback is Trevor Simeon, Denver. Tampa allows over 270 yards passing per game and has given up 7 passing touchdowns over the first 3 games of the season. Simeon is completing over 65% of his passes, as I mentioned in the matchup breakdown, and is coming off a 312-yard, 4-touchdown performance against a top 15 pass defense in Cincinnati. Plenty to like about Trevor Simeon this week. Who's your running back?
My running back is Orleans Darkwa.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
No way.
Back-to-back Giants here. So just hear me out. There's nobody else. So just by sheer opportunity, he has the potential to break off a big one. Orleans Darkwa. We'll see.
That's insane.
Back-to-back Giants running backs. Awesome.
I like my bargain bin way better this week. He is Isaiah Crowell, Cleveland. In the first 3 weeks of this season, Washington has given up 147 yards and 2 scores to the Steelers in week 1, 102 yards and 3 scores to the Cowboys in week 2, and 120 yards and 2 scores to the Giants in week 3. Crowell has handled nearly 60% of running back carries for the Browns through 3 weeks, is averaging nearly 6 yards per carry, and has scored 2 touchdowns. A prime candidate this week, if you ask me.
I don't even know a league where he's available. I think you cheated.
No. Actually, he's available in lots of leagues.
That's terrible. I would love to play with these guys.
Yeah, apparently people just don't like the Browns whatsoever. Dropped him outright or didn't draft him in the first place. Who's your pass catcher?
Wide receiver Cole Beasley. People have still not caught on to what Beasley is doing. He's buried in the depth chart, so by default, people don't look into that stuff. But you are, because you're listening, and now you're going to go out and grab Cole Beasley because he is the leading receiver on the Cowboys team and has the most comfort with Dak Prescott.
I have a better Beasley. His name is Jameson Crowder.
Terrible.
Plays for Washington.
Nope.
Averaging over 8 targets per game over the first 3, coming off a 78-yard, 1-touchdown performance last week, in which he also returned a punt for a touchdown. Particularly in PPR leagues, Crowder is a fantastic wide receiver 2 flex candidate, considering a plus matchup versus the Browns, who have given up touchdowns to Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, Mike Wallace, Jordan Matthews, and Nelson Aguilar over the first 3 weeks. I think Jameson Crowder could be in line for another big game this week. And those are our bargain bin picks.
Bargain bin Ronies.
We've left ourselves plenty of time, 7 minutes to be exact,
Excellent.
to talk 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker. Any number of topics we want to bring up, talk about in rapid-fire fashion. I don't know what the heck I'm going to talk about, so you might as well lead off.
Perfect. You know what really drives me bonkers? Even whether I'm there in person or I'm watching on TV.
I will say people not using their turn signal.
No, because I don't use my turn signal.
Oh, you're one of those.
Yeah, I am one of those.
Freaking Iowans.
The Minnesota Vikings horn just makes me want to puke.
Why?
Brrr! All the time on a completed pass. Brrr! Touchdown. Brrr! Everything is a horn, and it just annoys the crap out of me.
I think you need some historical perspective.
No, I don't need any history. That's terrible.
I'm a Lions fan.
I
You're
hate
jealous. You don't have a sound like that.
No, we have cool stuff like Defend the Den, Lion Roars. And we have this guy, I don't remember what his name is, but he's like the human mascot. And every time they get a touchdown, if you're there at the stadium, he comes out and sings the Lions fight song every time. It's pretty cool.
You know what I think of when I think of Lions?
Lion King, King of the Jungle.
Wizard of Oz, Cowardly Lion.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh.
Which, when the Lions were revealing their new logo, people were putting like the Cowardly Lion on the side of the football helmets. That was pretty funny.
Hey, nice color rush jerseys there.
Oh, they're
guys.
terrible.
Oh, they're the worst. We've already talked about that,
Yeah.
though. So
Yeah.
let's not
Different
waste the segment on that. How about vintage video games? Did you own an Atari growing up?
I had an Atari 2600.
I did too.
And I have an Atari, was it 3200?
No. So you had the 2600 or the 7800?
So I have the 7800 in my house right now.
Oh, you really do?
Yep, and I have about 8 games for it.
And that was all there really was?
Yeah, there was not much. It doesn't have much resale.
No, the 2600 was the one that had a ton of games.
Conquest, I remember playing Conquest.
Conquest, okay. So like
Pitfall.
the ones that, like I remember Pitfall, Donkey Kong. I remember playing Pac-Man for the first time.
I remember playing Pinball, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes. You want to know the one game that everybody had at least 10 copies of for some reason?
River Raid.
Combat.
Combat.
Somehow that game, like, and then there was the one game. Have you ever heard of this before? There's actually a spot, and I can't remember what state it's in for the life of me. Maybe California, where people buried copies of E.T.
Okay, so here's the historical background on that.
Oh, you know that.
So there is an actual documentary out there. Yeah, so it was actually in Nevada.
Nevada.
Where they buried it was the publisher who buried all of these games out there because they could not get rid of them, because what happened is when the game was being created, the game was created without actually knowing the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they created a game based off of what they thought the movie was going to be like, and it was utter and complete disaster because there's speed runs of E.T. out on YouTube right now of people beating E.T. in like 17 seconds because they know exactly which hole to drop in. It's terrible.
Speed runs are fun, by the way. Like the old Super Mario speed runs or Metroid speed run, or like those are fun. Like for me as a vintage video gamer, like I grew up on the Atari, and then of course we got a Nintendo.
Yep.
But we didn't get it until like 5 years after all my friends had it already.
Oh, see, so
I got the Atari. The winter that Nintendo came out, I got my Atari.
I won my NES in a raffle in our hometown. We had like this Mardi Gras stuff, and that was like the grand prize. And I bought it and won, and that was a huge accomplishment, which I have 2 NESs, about 40 games. Most of them are in their boxes. Have a whole bunch of like original instruction books and stuff like that. Super Nintendos. I have a whole bunch of just old junk.
Are you getting on the list for that Nintendo unit that's coming out?
I own
Christmas?
all those games.
I want
it. It's cool.
It is cool.
But I own all of those games.
That's pretty awesome.
So, and I've got a different system aside from the actual NES that upgrades to HD.
Oh,
so it automatically stretches it out.
That's
and
amazing.
Modifies it.
I want to play that.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I can hook it up. It's legit, man. I love it.
All right. Well,
how much time we got left?
2 more minutes.
2 more minutes.
Figure out a time that we can get together, and I want to play some Nintendo games.
Deal.
Yeah. Because I mean, what was the best Nintendo game? I say Super Off Road.
So
it was a great arcade game too, with the actual wheel. And
the
wheels
and but like I have Nintendo games from like Tubin. I don't know if you know what that is, but like the original Final Fantasy is my favorite. But I have
role-playing guy.
I have like Marble Madness was one of my favorite games.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
It was super aggravating.
Yes, it was.
But I have I have like Classic Concentration, that old TV show game.
Where you actually draw something?
Yeah,
yes.
Win, lose, or draw. And I mean, I have all that stuff. So it's just terrible. I have a bunch of.
You know what my favorite RPG was? Everybody loves Zelda and all that, but like my favorite role-playing game was easily Maniac Mansion. Because you could actually pick your characters.
Yeah.
And like, it would affect how you play.
I have the original Gauntlet too, where you literally just there was no end and you just slaughtered demons.
We have fit so many like classic video game references into just a few minutes here. Like I could talk about this. This could be a podcast where you just talk about vintage video games. Actually, there is one of those already. It's called Cinemassacre. He used to be called the Angry Video Game Nerd. But if you go on YouTube, you search Cinemassacre. It's worth it. Speaking of people you should check out, the Sleeper Wire folks, the Sleeper Wire podcast, fellas, Nick and the guys we've mentioned. The Sleeper Bot app is the best app on
the planet.
Apple, Android.
Until we put our own out, then it'll be the second
I'm not
best.
going to try to compete because Sleeper Bot really good at what they do. You know that feeling of like knowing something before everybody else?
It's so awesome.
That's what Sleeper Bot is.
That's what Sleeper Bot is. It could pop up on your phone. Boom, this person has been ruled out. You can go out, pick somebody up before anybody even knows it actually happened.
We're going to have Nick from the Sleeper Wire podcast on this show next week. I'm super excited to have him on. I actually won a bet, so Nick is going to be singing a song of my choice on my podcast.
Beautiful.
I'm so happy about this. Now he's going to go double or nothing. It's going to be trouble.
No, you got to take payment.
No, he will. He's a good man, like I said. Check out the Sleeper Wire podcast. Again, hope you'll check us out next week. We're on the air each and every Thursday, 11 to 1 on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio, our radio home out of Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, online at espndesmoines.com. Brian and I try to put content up there as much as humanly possible. Again, thank you for listening. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show.